Hi everyone, this is Connor Downey, and you are listening to the Vitalis Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitalis Podcast. This is where we don't just talk about health, we unlock full human potential. And so today's episode is going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Hopefully, I can add some more value to your day. Thank you all for tuning in today. I think that obviously there's a lot of platforms that you can listen to. There's a lot of individuals and resources out there. So thank you for taking time to listen to this podcast. And as always, I will do my very best to give you as much relevant and research-based information, anecdotal experiences, and personal experiences that I can to add value and information, and of course provide some guidance in and around this space or whatever topic that we're talking on. So um, now this episode is about your internal command center, your hormones, and the messengers of vitality, mood, strength, sex drive, fertility, and ultimately longevity. And so if you have felt out of rhythm or off of your game, or like you're living at 60% of what you should be, there is a darn good chance that your hormones are behind it. And whether you are a woman that is navigating fatigue or mood swings or trouble sleeping, or a man that is losing your edge, this episode is for you. So let's talk about hormones. This is going to be fun. This is going to be a good one. So, as you all know, I've had a lot of great experiences in and around the hormone space. I have had the opportunity to work with some very cutting edge and leading individuals and minds in and around the hormone space for the last several years. And one of which was Dr. David Rosensweet. If you have the opportunity, tune in and look up Dr. David Rosensweet. He is one of the foremost minds in and around hormones, specifically women's hormones, and has just some incredible research. He was on the lecture circuit for a very long time, taught a lot of individuals, and held a lot of lectures in and around hormones, specifically women's hormones, and really took a approach of titration and dialing in women's hormones that is so unique. If you haven't read his book, Happy Healthy Hormones, I do recommend it. This isn't a plug, as for myself or anything that I do. I just think that there is a lot of really, really good information in and around that book that I think a lot of people don't have access to or haven't heard. Or same thing too, on this episode, we're going to talk about cancer and its ties to hormones or the lack thereof. We're going to talk specifically about the Women's Health Initiative and that study that took place and all of the tragedies that kind of came from it. And specifically, we're going to talk, about a few other individuals in this space. One of those is Dr. Abram Blooming. He wrote the book Estrogen Matters. So if you haven't read that book as well, it's fantastic. It really specifically touches on cancer in and around hormones. So there's a whole bunch of great information that I'm looking to provide to you all today. And so I think starting off, the best place to go is really with the basics. And so specifically talking about hormones themselves. So we look at, truthfully, hormones are some of the most fascinating and powerful biochemicals in our body. They control so many things. So women rely on 4 pillars of hormones. Men primarily drive on 2. And so women, when we look at the hormones that they need to function, we're looking at estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and DHEA. Not a lot of people talk about DHEA. We're going to talk about DHEA because it is a very important component. And these control everything from cognitive function to metabolism to libido, sleep, and bone strength. And then we're also going to talk about average ratios, right? So the average ratio for optimal balance in women is, when we look at estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and DHEA, so one to the next, we're looking at a 100 to 10 to 1 to 200 ratio. And men are also the ones that thrive specifically on healthy balances between testosterone and estrogen. And so the ideal testosterone to estrogen ratio we see is from 10 to 1 to 21. Really, more men are closer to the 21 ratio. And so that's, between like 7 to 900 for their testosterone and 20 to 40 for their estrogen. And so when these ratios get off, we start feeling it. We notice it immediately, and it's very hard. We notice really bad fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, low libido, poor recovery. And so hormones are really one of the first places that you need to look when your life kind of goes haywire, out of whack. And so before we start specifically touching on each individual hormone, I want to tell you that there are so many individuals out there that are dealing with hormonal imbalances. They don't quite understand why their body is feeling the way that it is, and they need a little bit of direction. And unfortunately, the resources that we have access to are not there. We see there are so many men and women that unfortunately don't have the education around hormones, and I'm hoping to provide a little bit more of that. I think we're getting more and more there, but unfortunately, there's a real truth in and around hormones that so many people don't quite understand, and it has to really do with the education in and around hormones. So, um, all the way from the start. So when we talk about the providers that are prescribing these hormones and the clinics that you're going to and where you're receiving this information, I think a lot of people don't quite understand the importance of knowing who it is that's providing these treatments to you. And so typically we see so many women just off the bat. I think women are a little bit they're so much more complex than men just to start off when it comes to their hormones. Women need very specific, very dialed in and titrated regimens when it comes to these hormones. And they are very sensitive to uh, certain ester bases, certain key components that we're going to talk about. And so there are so many women that I've seen that will start noticing the side effects of hormonal decline. And the first place they go is their primary care doctor or their OBGYN. And this is nothing against primary care doctors or OBGYNs. They provide a fantastic service. I know several of them that are amazing. I think OBGYNs are really amazing at what they do. Unfortunately, OBGYNs are surgeons and primary care doctors, right? They focus on just a completely different modality of what it is that we're looking to achieve here. So when they go to these individuals, unfortunately, when we look at the educational component, we look at where are hormones being taught and who do we trust to provide this information, we see that in medical schools, several doctors have come out and they've specifically quoted the fact that they have not received the level of education that they should have in and around the hormone space. And it is very true. It's a very new industry. It's unregulated in the aspect that you would think. And so I see so many providers that go through medical school, they come out, they go into whatever niche it is that they go into, and they also try to manage hormones. And the reason is because as an OBGYN or as a primary care doctor, you see these declines, or you see these people that are having these issues in and around hormones, and you've never really received the training that you should have on the the aspect of titration, the right kind of hormones, symptomology, treating symptoms, so treating your patient, not just your blood work, and the importance of symptomology in and around hormones. Um, and we see providers get out, and unfortunately, they're left in a position where they need to have an answer. They need to be able to give a patient some direction. It's not in their repertoire to say, I don't know. And we're holding providers, specifically these doctors that we see on a very frequent basis, to this level to be able to give us that answer. Um, and it's the same thing, like everyone has specialties for a reason, right? Like if you needed specific nutritional advice, you should be going to a nutritionist, right? If you need somebody to help you get your weight down or build muscle, you should be going to a personal trainer, right? Or working with some kind of a coach, right? If you just had some kind of surgery or injury, you're probably going to go and see a physical therapist, right? Same thing. If you're going to go have open heart surgery, you're going to go and see somebody that specializes in every single piece of what it is that you're looking to achieve, right? Even dentists, right? Dentists have um, a very unique select level of training past medical school that dials them into the work that they're going to be doing, right? Podiatrists, whatever it is that you're looking at, right? So hormones, unfortunately, is not like that. Like when somebody wants to offer hormones, if I graduated medical school today, I could start offering hormones. I could call myself a hormone doctor. And unfortunately, when an individual goes through medical school, they get maybe an hour, a few hours of endocrinology and specifically on hormones and treating hormones. And most of the time it's put on by a large pharmaceutical company. There's a lot of direction and ties and oversight. Funding is a big one too that comes from pharmaceutical industries in and around med schools. And so it's become such a pharmaceutical and medication driven educational platform that we don't see a lot of providers are necessarily getting, the areas of expertise that they really need to. And the reason is because hormones are a completely different space, right? Like there are FDA approved hormonal treatments, but when we specifically talk about the things that people should be on, we're going to talk about compounded bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, right? So that level of hormonal replacement, something that is bioidentical or identical to what your body is producing and needs, is different from what a lot of these providers are going to be having access to or education on. So we hold these providers of ours in such a high aspect and regard for the knowledge that they need to be able to provide and the direction. And unfortunately, they do the best that they can. And it's not necessarily always the best or the right direction. Now, in my opinion, are some hormones better than no hormones at all? 100%, right? Like there is typically way more good than harm that comes from a lot of these hormones. But there are some real women that I've worked with that unfortunately have had some really poor side effects, poor experiences, just because their providers did not understand what was going on with their body and where they needed to head with their hormones. And so, just as an example, right? Perfect example. I see typically what happens is a lot of women will go to their OBGYN or their primary care provider, and their primary care will start off with lab work, right? And here's the truth. If you are a woman that is dealing with any kind of hormone decline and you are concerned about your hormones, you're reaching perimenopause or menopause, and you're wondering if you should be going onto hormone replenishment or replacement, and if you're going to step into this space, blood work is a horrible place to start. And that's where so many women go to. They feel all of these symptoms that we're going to talk about, and they go to their provider, blood work gets ordered, and it comes back normal, right? Or one component might be off. And so they're like, oh, yeah, your estrogen's a little bit low. Let's put you on the estrogen patch. And when we start messing with one hormone, we start messing with all of them, right? We talked about the ratios, right? Those ratios need to be maintained. When we start messing with a ratio, the body can't maintain homeostasis, and it needs to maintain homeostasis. We'll talk about it with men too. Um, and when we start messing with testosterone, what happens to estrogen and why we have to be on aromatase inhibitors and things like that. So many women will go down this rabbit hole, and they'll go down getting blood work done. And I see a lot of women come back, their blood work is normal. And their doctor is like, yeah, you're fine. You don't need any hormones. Right, we're seeing younger and younger individuals are having significant hormone decline. And we start asking why. Why are so many people having hormonal decline? Well, we're noticing, as I've talked about on this podcast before in earlier episodes, the level of toxicity that we're reaching, right, is astronomical. The exposure to BPAs and PFOAs and phthalates and all of these endocrine disrupting chemicals, these things that are pro-estrogenic and androgenic in our body that are not protecting the hormones that we need, are disrupting everything. And they are very, very powerful, powerful biochemicals in our body. And the moment we start disrupting them, they start affecting everything. So we have to be very careful and very selective with not only what we're exposing our body to, we look at the synthetic materials that are in everything, right? Like these forever chemicals, these PFOAs, the BPAs, we talk about all of these endocrine disruptors, right? Teflon is a huge one. If you research Teflon and you research the history behind it and what they were dumping into the Ohio and the exposure that all the workers had when they laced their cigarettes with Teflon, that whole experience. If you want a really good movie to watch, go watch Black Skies. That really dives into DuPont and all the Teflon exposure and what really happened. And so so we have all of these individuals that are having chronic toxicity, right? And it is disrupting hormones earlier and earlier and earlier. We talk about that. We see men's sperm counts and testosterone are down well over 50%, in the last several decades. We look at women as well. We see miscarriages are on the rise because of it. Men's chromosomes and sperm formulate the placenta. So we see high levels of miscarriages, especially within that first few weeks and trimester, are directly correlated to the men and the strength of the DNA and the chromosomes that they're contributing. And then we also look at, the pro-estrogenic effects of hormonal contraceptives, right? Or the things that women are consuming on a consistent basis that are hormonally changing their body in a facet that it shouldn't. So I see so many women that go on hormonal-based contraceptives that are, we'll just say estrogen-based as an example, and estrogen is an amplifier. So we see higher levels of anxiety. We see trouble sleeping. We see, a lot of women are noticing like what you can say is either too high of estrogen or progesterone deficiency, as well as inability to sleep through the night, waking up with racing heart, racing mind, um, having to go to the bathroom all throughout the night. And so we see a lot of young women have very similar symptoms, and it's because their body is on this synthetic form of estrogen that they're taking orally, which, we don't give estrogen orally, a true estrogen orally because of the toxicity that it causes to the liver. Yet we're over here giving, a synthetic form of estrogen as a form of a hormonal contraceptive, and we know there's effects. We also look at the clotting risk. If any of the women have aura migraines, they're directed away from estrogen-based birth control because of the risk of increase in clot. So what happens is these women start noticing these same effects of altering in their hormones, right? All these high levels of anxiety, and instead of going on to an IUD or a non-hormonal based contraceptive or doing any kind of like cycle tracking and tracking their ovulation states or using any other form of protection, they go to their doctor. Their doctor puts them on an antidepressant, and that's not the issue, right? So now we're masking the problems that are coming up from the hormonal contraceptive because we don't want to, tell women that like, hey, this is actually your birth control that's causing this. So that's one perfect example, right, of women that are going to their providers, these young women. Or when we talk about blood work, which I was talking about earlier, women will go to their provider, and when they walk in, they have their blood work done and their blood work is normal. And they wonder, okay, well, why is my blood work normal? Right? It's got to be something else, right? Maybe something else is wrong with me. And they feel like they're insane. They feel like they go crazy because their providers are not necessarily educated on the peaks and troughs of blood work. So, both men and women, when we talk about blood work, this is important. So, let's talk about blood work. The reason blood work is not completely accurate, we treat it like it is the gold standard on everything, right? But it is a snippet. It is a small peek into what's actually going on. Yes, not enough people get blood work done, especially men. Men that go on testosterone replacement need to be having blood work done very consistently. But what we're noticing is that a lot of women will go into their doctor, they'll get blood work done, and there's a couple things that happen. The doctor's either like, I'm not ordering your blood work, you're too young to be having hormonal issues, which necessarily isn't for them to say. It's not hurting them, it's not hurting them their license, ordering some blood work and a woman comes back and everything's normal. That's totally fine, right? Maybe something else is off. But what we're seeing is that so many women are going in and they're being made to feel like, oh, well, these aren't hormonal issues. I'm not ordering blood work for you because you're too young. We just talked about how many endocrine disruptors we're exposed to on a constant basis. And it's unplausible that a woman is having some kind of hormonal disruption from the exposure on a chronic basis, right? So outside of that, we see if you're in the range, then you classify as someone that doesn't need treatment, which is outrageous as well, right? We see this happens to men all the time as well. Men will go in, they'll get their blood work done. The range for testosterone is 4 to 900, right? So if you get your blood work done, are they showing what an optimal level is for you as an individual? No, your optimal output might be 6 or 700, but if you're at 450, they're going to say, I'm not treating you, or you don't need hormone replacement, or we're only giving you just a very, very small amount. And I see it all the time with men in the military, men that try to go through the VA and get approved for hormone replenishment, and they've been exposed to a lot of stuff in and around the military, and their hormones are in the tank. They feel awful. They're expected to perform at high levels, and their doctor's saying, "You're at 425. I'm not treating you, right? You're on the low end of normal." The low end of normal, this man's normal output is probably where he's symptom free and feels amazing and is operating very well, where he's still protecting his bones, his muscles, his brain, his heart is probably much, much higher than 400 or 425, right? And so we see the same thing with women. Well, you're in the range, right? Well, just because you're in the range doesn't necessarily say that you are where you should be, right? So, especially women that are reaching into their mid to late 30s, definitely into their 40s, they're getting closer and closer to perimenopause and to menopause, where they're noticing significant hormone decline. If you're in your 40s and you're having these issues, you're probably having significant hormone issues or decline. Um, Same thing with women that have had hysterectomies. They're immediately told, hey, we need to get you on hormones. But I can tell you as a testimonial or as a piece to why this is so important. My mother was on oral hormone replacement right after she had a hysterectomy after I was born. It's almost 30 years she was on oral-based compounded hormones, and her doctor never adjusted them. So she was on the same dose for decades. And she had been telling her doctor, I'm having sleepless nights. I'm waking up with racing heart, racing mind. I'm waking up like I need to go to the bathroom all throughout the night. I feel like I'm still having hot flashes. I'm noticing that I am, I can't lose weight. I can't put on muscle. My metabolism isn't right. I feel all of these symptoms that I'm describing. And her doctor was like, well, your blood work looks fine, right? Your blood work looks great, so we're not going to adjust anything. And so when I stepped into the hormone space and I was working specifically with Dr. David Rosensweet and his team over at the Menopause Method in Bright, and specifically put her on these topical hormones that were titrated specifically to her needs. Within 3 months, all of her symptoms were gone. And she felt amazing. She's like, wow, you did it. I feel great. Right. And so we got her to a place where she was actually symptom free, but her doctor had been telling her, well, it's something else. It's got to be something else. It's not your hormones. Your hormones are fine, right? We're not adjusting your hormones. And so I don't know if it's a fear perspective of like, well, the blood work says you're fine. I don't want to adjust them because, then we got to do this process all over again. That says laziness to me, right? Like, do what is right for your client, or if you don't know, refer them to somebody who does. That's how it should be. And so, unfortunately, we as a society hold providers, if you're in a white lab coat, then you know everything. No, that's not necessarily true. You need to go to a hormone provider, somebody that is specifically trained in hormones. So when we talk about the downsides of blood work, why women shouldn't be getting blood work, let's also touch on the topic of how women peak and trough at different times of the day, right? Same thing with men. So my peak testosterone output might be at 11 a.m., where another man's peak output might be at 3 p.m., right? And so unless we're pulling labs 5 or 10 times in one day to get a correlated volume, we're not getting the best readings. Same thing with women, right? We need to know exactly where is that woman in and around her period. Where is, when was her last period? If she's going through perimenopause, she's become menopausal. When was her last normal menstrual cycle? Same thing too. We need to have an adjustable range. What is the normal peak hormone output for women in their 20s, right? Like we need to have that data, which we have, which we've actually found. But a lot of it isn't used. And so we see so many women that go to their doctor, they get their blood work drawn and they're not getting it done in an accurate place, right? Same thing. Everyone's big on the Dutch test right now. I'm not here to stomp on the Dutch test, but there are better tests than the Dutch test. The Dutch test is collecting urine. There's a lot of hormones in urine. 24-hour urine hormone testing is the best, in my opinion, because we've seen the Dutch test is a small drop of urine on filter paper that dries, it gets shipped out. And so you're missing all of the important data that comes in live and still wet urine samples. And so for a woman to collect urine over 24 hours, and we see how many hormones are in urine, they're noticing significantly more data, better adjustments in women in their hormones, specifically from looking at a 24-hour urine test where they collect urine over 24 hours. It's all mixed together. It's all still active and wet. They take a small sample, gets shipped to the lab, and then they test that. Far better, far more accurate than the Dutch test. And when you compare testing, the results are all over the board when we look at testing. So I encourage you, for one, and we're going to talk about it a whole lot more as we continue through here, but find the right kind of provider. Find somebody who is trained in hormones, who's been doing hormones for a significant amount of time, that understands what they're doing. Don't just go to your primary care doctor, your OBGYN, and expect to get completely fixed, because you're probably going to get put on an estrogen patch or you'll get put on a progesterone cream, and it's not going to fix everything. And they're probably not even doing the right amount of testing to see long term, how are these hormones protecting you into your 80s and 90s? And that's what really matters. That's the important stuff, which is why the 24-hour urine hormone test is so important, because we see that it is specifically looking at, like, if you have high levels of calcium in your urine as a woman, we know you're not making enough estrogen to protect your bones, which is that's very important. When you start looking at osteopenia long-term into your 80s and 90s, we don't need somebody falling and breaking a hip Same thing, sarcopenia, loss of the muscles, the inability to be stable when you're standing and walking and sitting down and standing up. So these are the things that matter, which is why people should be on these hormones, for life at a point once they do start, because they're going to have steady and consistent hormone decline. So, and I see so many people that are in separate camps, right? Like, I specifically don't want to take hormones because I want to do everything natural. I don't want to put more in my body. And I think that's a great idea. I think people can do a lot to mitigate the downside of the consistent decline of hormones, right? You can limit toxic exposure, eat the right foods, take care of yourself, reducing body fat, um, staying away from major medications, making sure that you're consuming high volumes of water on a consistent basis, like all of these things that we know to do, right? However, you're still going to consistently probably have a steady decline of hormones. And so we see that the earlier that people get on these hormones, the better outcomes that they have long term, lower risk of disease. We'll talk about all of that. So, um, and then you have the camp of people that are like, look, I just want to feel good. I want to be able to live life and feel good and feel normal. And I don't want to be losing some of the prime years of my life from hormone decline or from inadequate hormone. Same thing with the hysterectomy. Right? My mother, and I told you about her, like she lost decades not getting sleep in the middle of the night. Like she went decades without a full night's sleep. She went decades without feeling normal. She went decades without feeling herself. So that's a perfect example of somebody who's like, they need these hormones, but they need the right kind of hormones and titration, and they need the right levels in their body. And then you have the class of people that just want to live as long and as healthy and have as the greatest levels of longevity in their body as possible. Hormones tie into that too. So I think it's important to talk about why these hormones are so important. I think there's still so much of this ideology of like, oh, well, this is just life. Hormones are just declining. I just need to go through life and I'm going to hit, menopause for women or andropause for men. And it is just a normal progression, and it's not. You should be feeling as good as you can for your entire life. I see people that are on these hormones, bioidentical hormone replacement, in their 80s. Then they're running around playing tennis, competitive tennis. They're very smart. They have very low visible signs or risk factors for Alzheimer's or dementia. They're functioning very, very well in their 80s and 90s. And I think that's ultimately the goal, right? Like, we're not here just to coast into the casket after 40 or 50. Like, we should be living a long, full, productive life where you're healthy, you're able to take care of yourself, and you're not relying on other people to take care of you when you're in your 70s and 80s. That's horrible. So for people, if you want to live the longest, healthiest life you can, this is what matters long term. Like, all of the little stuff we're talking about matters as you start getting higher in age and you start functioning, um, in that capacity as a someone that's in advanced age. You should be able to take care of yourself. So we're going to talk more and more about this as we continue. So, but I got to jump on to the next topic. So, nice little rabbit hole, lots of good information there. A nice little tangent about providers and blood work, but take that into consideration. Like, I do think that's important for people to hear, that you need to find the right provider. You need to find somebody who's going to titrate your levels accordingly to symptom alleviation, and even past that. And you need to find somebody who understands the difference in testing. Someone who's not just looking at blood work, someone who is treating you as an individual and not just as a number on a screen. So, um, understand that you're not just a number on a screen. Your hormones, these biochemicals in your body, need to be treated adequately, and they need to be treated specifically to you, right? Not just, okay, we're just going to get you to when you're in range. We need to get you to when you are feeling like you should be. That is the biggest misconception in and around hormones, that we just get people to where their blood work looks good and we leave them. No, no, absolutely not. People should be hitting a point of symptom alleviation and long-term bone, muscle, and brain protection. That is what we're looking for with hormone replacement and replenishment. So the next thing I really want to speak about is DHEA. So I think a lot of times we don't talk about DHEA. I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but DHEA is the mother hormone, right? So it is the precursor to everything else. So it is made in our adrenal glands, converts to estrogen, testosterone, and your other androgens. It is crucial for mood, immune strength, mental clarity, energy, resilience. So for women, DHEA is the major driver of libido, cognition, and vitality after 30. So women have high levels of gray matter in their brain. DHEA is very protective of gray matter and your ability for cognitive thinking, for higher level thinking, your ability for multitasking. So DHEA is very important for that. And when we specifically look at how these hormones convert, right? Like there's DHEA, there's testosterone, and then there's estrogen, and it converts to one into the next. So it's a lot like when we look at catecholamines in our body and we specifically look at how our body converts dopamine to norepinephrine to epinephrine. It's the same principle with these hormones. So DHEA converts to testosterone, which converts to estrogen, which a lot of people don't realize, right? Like that's why we're so concerned about when men go on testosterone. We want to prevent high levels of what's called aromatization, which is that conversion, the conversion from testosterone into estrogen. So, for women, when we start looking at DHEA blood levels for women, it's right around 100 to 150 to 300. Men are 2 to 400. There's DHEA supplements that people can take. It's a lot more important when we look at women than it is for men. Men really thrive on when we look at testosterone, and estrogen is still very important for men. That's a key component. We'll talk about that too, but we really want to speak about why these hormones impact fertility in young men and young women, because I get this question all the time, which is, hey, if I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, and I'm having some kind of hormone decline, which is not out of the question. I think people think like, okay, you need to be on hormones when you're in your 60s or in your 50s, right? Like people think, okay, when women hit menopause, and that's when they need to be on these hormones. That's not necessarily true. Like there are significant volumes of hormone decline at earlier ages. And we've been talking about all the factors significantly over the last few episodes. So, um, this is a lot of topics that people avoid, right? Until it's too late. And so your fertility is fragile. And I do want to be very key on that. And there is a domino effect. And so for men and women, hormones are going to affect fertility. For women, long-term birth control is going to shut down your ovulation. It's not going to regulate it. It makes it harder and harder to be able to have children later in life. We look at estrogen dominance and progesterone deficiencies are going to create anovulatory cycles, luteal phase deficits, poor egg quality, thin uterine lining, cervical mucus issues. We see that a lot of women need anywhere from 12 to 18 months after stopping the oral-based hormonal contraceptive or any kind of hormonal contraceptive to regain a natural rhythm within their body. And so, even in men, we see testosterone levels in men under 30 are plummeting. We see a lot of xenoestrogens in plastics, seed oils, a lot of these chemicals that suppress testosterone and increase estrogen, which we don't really want. Testosterone is very important for men when we look at sperm production and we look at overall vitality and their ability to function on a consistent basis. So we do see that there is a significant amount of men that jump on TRT without fertility support, which can shut down sperm production. The reason this is we have something called our hypothalamic pituitary axis. And I've spoken about this before, but your hypothalamic pituitary axis is important to maintain. It's important for men. It's very important for women. We don't want to shut that down. It's basically our brain communicating through our central nervous system to our glands that's telling us what do we need to produce, right? So when testosterone gets low in men, our central nervous system is basically communicating, saying, hey, we need to improve testosterone production. That basically communicates through our hypothalamus, which communicates to our pituitary gland. A lot of people don't realize this. The hypothalamus is like your switchboard. It's receiving these communications. It sends it to the pituitary gland, which is the master hormone regulator. The pituitary gland then sends these signals out to its respective counterpart to produce these hormones we're looking for. So it would communicate to the testicles or the ovaries in women and produce said sex hormones that are needed. So we see a lot of men that go on TRT or HRT without things like HCG, Clomid. I don't really like Clomid. I prefer enclomiphene. I think there's a lot better results when it comes to enclomiphene, especially in and around spermatogenesis. HMG is another one. So these compounds prevent testicular atrophy. They prevent a zero-level sperm count or infertility, which can sometimes be permanent. So we don't want to shut off that hypothalamic pituitary axis. If men are going on testosterone replacement and they're not doing it at adequate they're going over the levels that they should, so super physiologic, or they are not watching this communication pathway for their hypothalamic pituitary axis, then they're going to notice a lot more of these infertility issues. So I always tell men, before you go on testosterone replacement, and get a fertility test done. See where you're sitting at as far as fertility is concerned. So when we look at your sperm count, your morphology, all of these factors matter. So for me, and I talk about my fertility program, I over the course of the last 8 months, took my sperm up to 2 active sperm. And I have the active results that I'll post. Right now, it is cryopreserved. So, men, that's always an option. You can go through a cryopreservation. Obviously, that gives you the opportunity later in life. So that way, if you meet somebody, you have that and they can go through IVF and utilize that cryopreserved semen sample. I can tell you that everything improved. And basically, what I was doing is everything that I'm telling people to do, right? So, as a man, if you're trying to improve your sperm count, your morphology, you're trying to improve the motility of your sperm, all of these factors come into play. So, what was I doing? Well, for one, I reduced toxic exposure, right? I got rid of all the toxic exposure in my cookware, in a lot of my clothing, the phthalates that are in the deodorant and the products that I was using. I limited a lot of these factors that come into life. Then I did a detox, right? Which we talked about detox. If you haven't, go and check out my detox protocol. But how can we get rid of all of these things, these endocrine disruptors? So chelating the blood, the heavy metals, getting rid of, these xenoestrogens that are inside of our body, getting rid of the microplastics, and we look at even parasites, doing this full cleanse. So over 28 days or longer, I took my body and went through this entire process where I was detoxing and then getting the right kind of foods in my body. So re-nourishing my body with healthy food, stuff that isn't sprayed with pesticides, right? Things that aren't going to be, those are endocrine disruptors as well. We look at atrazine and these other herbicides. We want to limit that exposure in our body as much as possible. So get that out, right? And then start giving your body the necessary nutrients that you need. So give yourself antioxidants. Take things like NAD. I did in my 30-day detox, I used methylene blue as well to basically spark my mitochondrial function, cause levels of reactive oxygen species that were actually going to promote the release of all of that bad and compromised DNA to get out of my body. Very similar to vitamin C. So actually working on the bad stuff. And then replenished it with NAD. So started improving my mitochondrial function, started improving the cell communication in my body, which is very important for sex cells. We see a lot of people have fertility issues because their body doesn't have the necessary cellular energy to communicate and depolarize cells, and specifically split cells. When we look at mitosis and meiosis, the splitting and replication of cells, when we look at the splitting and replication of sex cells, which is where you're donating those chromosomes to be able to procreate, that's an important component. So people need that level of energy. NAD is a fantastic thing that you can be doing. I did a round of IV NAD, which I think is a fantastic thing. Niagen is fantastic as well. You can get oral Niagen supplements, which is just a different compound. I've talked about it a little bit as well. NAD is a larger compound. It's a little bit harder to get into the cells. NMN has to go through a lot of conversion processes. So I do like nicotinamide riboside the best, or NR, which is what Niagen offers. So that's a really good component that people can utilize. Um, and then high levels of HCG as well. So I see a lot of men are taking, anywhere from 1,000 to maybe 1,500 units of HCG a week, and that's all, right? And that's to keep your hypothalamic pituitary axis open, right? That's what HCG is designed for, is to keep that pathway open. So if you're taking that compound, yes, 1,500 units a week is adequate, right? Now, if you're trying to go through a fertility protocol, people should be taking anywhere from like 1,000 to 4,000 units every other day, or a few times a week. And so that's what I was doing. I was taking 3,000 units every other day, and saw fantastic improvements on top of taking the right type of nutrients and everything else. And I saw significant improvements that were already happening in my body and how I was feeling, and um, in my fertility levels and my testosterone, already from doing the detox and giving my body the right kind of nutrients. Even when we start looking at the specific levels in our body, so FSH and LH, testing FSH and LH. So follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone shows us if that communication pathway is open. So you should be testing that as well. If you're getting blood work done, if men specifically, since we're on that topic, are having labs drawn and you're only looking at testosterone, for one, you should be looking at free and total testosterone. You should be looking at your estrogens, and you should be looking at your FSH and LH. You should be taking a very key look at, okay, is that communication pathway open? If it isn't, we need to improve it. We need to get it open, right? We need to tell our body that, hey, we need to start producing more and more testosterone and sperm. And so that's where HCG comes into play, where enclomiphene comes into play. So taking these compounds is going to be really important for if you're on a fertility journey. 25 to 50 milligrams of enclomiphene every single day. 50 milligrams is a high dose, but 25 to 50 milligrams of enclomiphene, can help a lot of people when it comes to fertility as well, specifically in men. So those compounds have a high role to play when you're looking at that fertility journey, right? But you can significantly improve testosterone and significantly improve your sperm production just by doing all the other things that I just noted, right? And then look at where you're at, and then add those other compounds on, or add them on earlier if you want to accelerate your process, like I did. So that's where this comes into play, keeping that that process open. For a lot of men, it's important to make sure that if you're going on HRT, decide before you jump on it, when do you want to have kids? Have a timeline, right? Like, have a plan before you jump into this process. If you're already on it, formulate your plan now, right? Figure out, okay, if I want to have kids in the future, this is important to come off these compounds and start really making sure that your body's on an adequate point 6 months to a year before you have children, right? Like, now's the time to start prepping. If you think, okay, we're going to start trying, well, don't just start trying now. Like, get your body in a good position and then start trying. Because, like I said, like, miscarriage rates, the strength of the placenta, we start looking at birth defects, we look at all of this. A lot of it comes from the men. Like, men have a high level of responsibility when it comes to of procreation and developing a really, really strong, healthy child. So take care of your body now. Get in shape. Take the right kind of nutrients. Take care of your body. So I started taking very important compounds that are going to help support all of these factors in my body. So if anyone's interested, if you have questions specifically about my fertility protocol, you want to reach out and set up a call, please do. Like, we can dive into all of this because obviously I need to move on to the other topics, but I feel like there's a lot of information that men need, especially if you are a man that is taking, whether it's testosterone or if you're taking any type of PEDs as well. Like, all of these compounds are going to be affecting your fertility. If you want to have kids in the future, it is important to start taking this stuff into consideration now. So take that into a point. And same thing comes into everything for women as well. So we look at, I think for a lot of people, women think, okay, well, postmenopause HRT is going to be suppressing everything. And it's really not, right? Like, you are replenishing what is already gone. Now, as far as younger women, excessive or misused hormones can override the natural cycle, right? So you still need to be cautious with it. And so both men and women, a lot of times you look at, okay, hey, I want to get my hormones optimized. What can I do before going on to anything if I still want to have kids in the very near future? That's a question you need to ask. I would tell most couples, if you want to have kids in the next 6 months to a year, start taking this time to get your body really, really healthy, right? Don't go on to testosterone replenishment yet. Do all of these other factors that we're talking about. Get your body really healthy, get your levels up. Just by reducing toxic exposure and detoxing your body of these heavy metals and these xenoestrogens and these synthetic materials or these parasites, you can see significant improvements, significant improvements. But keep that in mind. Everyone's circumstance is a little bit different. So you really kind of have to take into account, what is your timing? What is it that you're looking to achieve? But that doesn't necessarily mean that going on hormones is going to suppress your ability to have kids in the future. It just means that you need to be a little bit more cautious to keep that axis on point, rehab your body adequately, make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and you're just being a little bit more proactive about it when it comes to your fertility. There's a lot of people that come off of very high levels of hormones. I've seen a lot of pro athletes or bodybuilders that come off of these hormones or come off of the PEDs and can still have kids. They just have to go through adequate preparation, detox, and get their bodies back on point like they need to. So the more work that you can do now or on a more frequent basis, the easier it's going to be. Now, let's talk about HRT versus CBHRT, compounded bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Okay. Now, conventional HRT is synthetic, mass produced, it's on a fixed dose. So think like Premarin, right? We haven't really talked about the WHI study, but horse estrogens, think about Provera, which is a synthetic progestin. When we look at CBHRT, right, which is a customized compounded bioidentical hormone, it is personalized dosing specifically in these hormones, whether it's testosterone, or we look at, okay, so I want to talk about the Women's Health Initiative and the 20-year fallout that followed that study. So the Women's Health Initiative back in 2002 was the world's largest funded study ever. It was millions and millions of dollars that were poured into this study, specifically looking at Premarin. And Premarin was the largest women's hormone manufacturer at the time. There was 20 million women that were on this synthetic estrogen-based hormone. And so this study came out, and they saw that there was a very, very small increased relative risk when it came to increase in breast cancer, to the point where in medicine we can't draw conclusions, right? Like at the level of relative risk that was increased, they stopped the study and they published all the information, and all of these doctors were confounded. They were upset with the fact that it was already published, that the media ran with it, and Premarin was a estrogen-based hormone that was derived from horse urine. And their societies have been doing this for thousands of years. We look at ancient Asian cultures and all these other cultures, like they would use the urine of pregnant women to be able to control populations and use it as a form of birth control. And so basically, Premarin basically used this as a form of estrogen. The reason is people don't really realize that when you need to go and get something patented or FDA approved, you want to get that patent placed into level. So let's say that you're releasing a drug and you want to get FDA approval. When you go through the FDA approval process, for one, it costs millions of dollars. It's very expensive. Nobody's going to do that unless they can patent something. So here's the issue with patents. You can't patent anything that is from the human body. If it is bioidentical, which we're talking about bioidentical hormones, you can't patent that. So no company is going to put a product through FDA approval, which is going to obviously cost tons and tons of money, to ultimately have somebody else come out the very next day and be able to offer it for pennies on the dollar because it's not patented, which is exactly what could happen. So this company said, okay, well, we're going to take dried horse urine, so from pregnant mares, and we're going to use that as a form of estrogen. And they did this, and there was a lot of women that had incredible benefits off of it. Incredible benefits. They definitely felt great, definitely did more good than harm. But obviously, the study came out, and they saw that literally overnight, Premarin stock dropped from 20 million women that were on this. It dropped to the low 2 million. And they basically were saying that it, in whole, the media ran with it, and it wasn't just that Premarin caused cancer. They said that HRT caused breast cancer, and that there was an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes, and ultimately that hormones in general, specifically estrogen, is going to be linked directly to cancer. And so women, I mean, completely started dropping off of Premarin, and the suffering that led to was drastic, and it infiltrated medical schools. And we saw for the next 20 years, it affected everything. And for 20 years, women were left to just deal with it. And the media got them wrong. The system panicked, and they were trying to say that, anybody that has a history of cancer should be nowhere near any form of hormone. We see it in men with prostate cancer, we see it in women with estrogen, and any kind of breast cancer. And breast cancer risk was linked to a synthetic progestin, right? We're specifically looking at something called Prempro. And the study was really looking towards a very interesting molecule called Provera. And that's really where we saw the increased risk. And we actually saw that estrogen-only users had lower breast cancer rates. So over 20 years, they did a 20-year follow-up study on these women that stayed specifically on Premarin, and they actually saw reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, reduced risk of heart attack, stroke, reduced risk of breast cancer, reduced risk of recurring cancers. And this was, by that time, the damage has already been done. We're looking at a 20-year follow-up study. So, basically 2022 comes out and we can release this data. And by that time, it was too late. And now we're still recuperating, right? I mean, it's 2025. A lot of the doctors now have seen the changes. There's a lot of things that have been published around it. But if you really want a great book that's on this, read Estrogen Matters, which is a fantastic book by Dr. Avram Blooming that speaks about all of this. And ultimately, society panicked. And so if you are somebody that's had a history of prostate cancer, you're somebody that's had a history of breast cancer, you can still have bioidentical hormone replacement. I think that is a massive thing that people don't talk about enough. There's women that suffer with all of these issues of hormone decline from any number of reasons. Same thing with men. And I've seen men that are in their 80s that had a history of prostate cancer that are on testosterone that are doing amazing. They feel great. They're functioning so much better than they would without it. They're so much stronger and they're living a very full life because we see that there are lower risk of reoccurrence with people that are on hormones. We see their body is healthier, they're living longer, they're functioning better, lower risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke, lower risk of osteopenia and sarcopenia, loss of the muscles and loss of the bones. So people have real benefits when it comes to, you know, comes to any of this. And here's the truth: when we talk about cancer, cancers don't just show up overnight. This is really important for people to realize. Most cancers take 10 to 15 years to grow large enough to be detected. So if you took a highlight reel of your life and you removed all the good parts and you only saw all the times that you were exposed to toxic chemicals, you only saw all the times that you were smoking and all of the poor things that you exposed your body to, you'd probably see that there's a lot of things that you were exposed to that could cause cancer. And that's what it comes down to. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of things that cause cancer. And so it's so hard for us to say that this is what was causing cancer when our body has so many things that are constantly being exposed to that are leading to these developments of these cancers. So literally, by the time a tumor is a centimeter in size, it has already gone through 30 plus doublings. That means that the hormone didn't cause it. We're seeing so many other things that have such a major impact and direct link to this. And so these cancers have been silently growing for a decade or more. And there's a lot of fantastic minds in and around this, right? So you look at NAMS 2022 that confirms that HRT is safe for women under the age of 60 and remains the best option for menopausal symptom relief. You look at Dr. Avram Blooming and Dr. David Rosensweet, which I was talking about. And they specifically, Dr. Avram Blooming is a fantastic oncologist that has debunked the WHI misinterpretation in his book, Estrogen Matters. So highly recommend reading that. There's so much great information there. And then we also need to look at the difference between bioidentical versus synthetic hormones, right? So Premarin and Provera, right? Premarin was horse urine estrogens. Provera was a synthetic progestin. And that's where the WHI is directly linking a lot of this fear to is from these synthetic hormones. We're not talking about compounded bioidentical hormone replacement, right? They're not the same. Compounded bioidentical hormones are molecularly identical to human hormones, and they bind and metabolize and act completely different than synthetic hormones. So we're looking at specifically like bioidentical estrogens and progesterone, a natural progesterone. There's no risk of increased breast cancer when it's started appropriately. And um, truthfully, estrogen isn't the villain. Inflammation is. So the real drivers of cancer we look at are chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, environmental toxins, oxidative stress, compromised immune function is a big one. We talked about the importance of our gut microbiome and the direct links between an inadequate gut microbiome and cancer development and the fuel that's used. Especially our diet is a huge one. We look at high glucose spikes and high levels of sugar in our body and what our cancer cells' innate metabolism is and how it survives inside of our body with this. So when we see estrogen, when balanced with progesterone, actually helps. It improves DNA repair. It enhances immune surveillance. It reduces insulin resistance. So removing estrogen can make a lot of it worse, not better. And so when we look at longevity, which is a key component in this, hormones and longevity, we look at estrogen and testosterone are proactive and they are things that are going to reduce osteoporosis. Specifically, we look at estrogen, reduce levels of osteoporosis, reduce cardiovascular disease, reduce Alzheimer's risk. Testosterone is going to support your muscles, so reduce risk of sarcopenia. We look at improved motivation, better brain performance, better blood sugar control. And then, of course, DHEA powers it all. So use these as you will. Protect your body, protect your performance. I see that taking these hormones as you age is a form of longevity. It is a form of protection. We see that people actually have lower risk of disease when they're on these hormones. We see that they have improvements in life, improvements in cognition, improvements in daily function. So I am not against the camp of protecting your body and keeping your body's natural hormone production as long as possible, but we all hit a point where we no longer can maintain those hormones any longer, where our body's no longer at a position where it is producing the level of adequate volumes that we need to function on a consistent basis. So yes, protect your hormones, limit chronic exposure. You should be doing this no matter what, right? When we look at disease and cancer development, all of these things that you can eliminate, which is going to improve your body's endogenous production of these hormones, absolutely. However, I do say that whether you have some kind of a predisposition, if there's other impacts that you can't change, your career, the exposure to the chemicals. We look at men in fire industries and EMS and the shift work that they're in. We look at women that have had hysterectomies, men that have hypogonadism. We look at any of these factors, especially aging, right? You hit a point when you're aging where you want to be able to function and protect your skin and your brain and your body for as long as possible. And you can tell people that are on hormones, you can see them when they're in their 60s, 70s, even in their 40s and 50s. You can tell when somebody is on hormone replenishment and they're taking care of their body because it's in their skin. It's visible in the aging signs that are present. So as a form of anti-aging, as a form of longevity, as a form of protecting your body for long periods of times, decades and years ongoing, including into your 80s and 90s, when people still want to be living long, full lives. If you still want to be intimate with your partner well past your 50s and 60s, hormones are an important piece of it. For men and women, it's very important for libido, for drive, for motivation, for any of these factors. So we are not designed as human beings to just slide into the casket. We are designed to live long and full lives, be intimate with our partners well into our 70s, 80s, and it's an important factor for men and women, right? When you are with somebody and you love somebody and you want to be able to express that with your partner and live a very long and full life with them and still experience all the things that you all experienced in your 40s and your 50s, these hormones tie directly into that. And we see in the data that we're seeing lower disease risks with individuals that are on it, lower Alzheimer's risk, lower risk of dementia. We're seeing people are functioning better, they're living longer, they're living healthier, they're doing more. And we see so many people, like, hormones are the number one link to somebody that goes into a nursing home or an assisted care facility over anything else. Why? Because when you start developing these things that we're speaking about, brittle bones, right? You start losing the protection of your bones from this level of estrogen, the protection of your muscles from this level of testosterone. You start losing the protection of your brain from these hormones and from DHEA. All of these things start to decline. Now you're a fall risk as you start getting older. You fall on your arthritic and osteoporotic hip and you fracture a hip and now you're stuck in a different home than you want to be, right? You go into an assisted care facility or a nursing home and nobody wants to live a life like that. They want to be in home with their spouse for as long as they can or with their family for as long as they can. And ultimately, they don't want anybody else taking care of them, right? Nobody wants to have that point. They want to be able to function very, very well in and through life. So hormones are a key component with that, right? As with anything, of course, yes, diet, exercise, getting out and getting sunlight, taking care of your vitamin D levels, all of these factors come into play. But hormones are extremely powerful biochemicals in our body that we need to respect, we need to take care of. And when you negate them and you don't take care of them, it ultimately fuels all of these poor outcomes and a poor functioning life. So keep that in mind. So for anyone out there, if you are living a flat, uninspired, exhausted, or reactive life, if you're feeling any of these things, you're not broken. You are likely hormonally depleted, and that can be changed. I can't tell you the amount of women that I've personally worked with that are like, thank God that I have been able to find you and get the information from you and work with the teams that you've worked with to get this level of hormone alleviation. And this is all over the world. This isn't a specific demographic or a specific group of people. This is men and women all over the country that have had these exact same experiences that have needed direction and ultimately have gotten incredible results from it. My own mother is a perfect testimonial to that, and so many close friends of mine. So this isn't fringe medicine. This is biochemistry, and applied with the right type of wisdom, the right individuals, the right product, the right leadership, you're going to have very incredible results from it. So if you want clarity, energy, confidence, vitality, it starts by taking control of the signals that are running your system. So step up, get started, work with someone who knows exactly what they're dealing with, knows your body, is willing to work with you, titrate you to sleep symptom alleviation, and has that level of authority in the space that you're trying to step into. And the real you is not gone. I think a lot of people need to understand that. Like, this is not just aging that you're stepping into in life where it's just time to let it go. This is something that you can switch back on, that you can get back. Everything. And these affect everything, right? Like, these can ruin, when your hormones are off, it can ruin careers, it can ruin personal relationships, it can ruin a lot of things. So if you value those, if you're dealing with any of this stuff, take these steps. Please feel free to reach out to me if you guys have any questions, whether it's about fertility or anything that we've talked about in this podcast. Feel free to send me a DM on Instagram, book a consultation with me, set some time apart, and we can sit down and speak some more. If you want to know how to detox your body and you want to get rid of a lot of these things that might be interfering with your fertility or interfering with your hormones, check out the Vitalis 28-day detox protocol. Anybody that listens to this podcast that goes in that and downloads that protocol, you get 15% off. So just use the code Vitalis15. You'll be able to get that discount. And thank you all for tuning in. This is fantastic. I love speaking about hormones. I love speaking about so many of these things. I've seen so many individuals get fantastic results from all the stuff that we're working on. So you're not alone. There are plenty of people out there if you want to feel the best that you can and operate the best that you can. So many people do. Don't be fearful. Don't be afraid. Take these steps. Reach out. Let's speak together. And thank you all for tuning in. Honestly, I am so grateful to have every single person that listens to this, that reaches out. Like I said, the feedback is always incredible. So if you all need anything, please keep listening. As always, like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you all next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into the Vitalis Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, we'd be so grateful if you'd leave us a rating and a review. It truly helps us grow. Share this episode with friends and family who are also on a journey towards deeper health and truth. And stay up to date with weekly episodes. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and follow us on Instagram at the Vitalis Podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for personalized medical or mental health advice, nor does it establish a provider-patient relationship. Always consult with your physician or qualified healthcare professional before making changes to your health protocols.